on one of my trips to L.A., within a week after we moved into the house, I'm offered a job by Columbia TriStar to be in charge of programming for distribution for the whole studio, which I take. Funny call to my wife. How are things going? Oh, the closet people just left. They just built the new closet. I said, well, I hope we can get it when we sell the house because we're leaving. And so we moved to L.A. about 6 months after we moved to Cincinnati. And I had to go in and resign to the guy, and it was tough because he was a good guy. But it was a great job for me. So I finally came out to L.A. Now I no longer ran a station production company, which I had done twice for Post Newsweek and Scripps Howard. Now I'm coming to run programming for an actual studio. This was syndication programming, first run. And Columbia was the last studio to get in the first run. Everyone else had first run shows. Columbia TriStar did not. They're now known as Sony. So I came in the late summer of 1992, and about 4 weeks into the job, my boss, Barry Thurston, walked in and said, I hope you have a show for us for NATPE. I said, Barry, I've been here 4 weeks and NATPE's 3 months away. And he said, well, we have to bring something to NATPE. I said, okay. And just by luck, a week later into my office comes Mark Itkin, the agent from William Morris, and his client Garth Anseer, who at that point, now we can look back, he programmed NBC and Fox and has a pretty illustrious career out here. Garth came in with an idea for a talk show starring this unknown chubby girl named Ricki Lake. He had been to all these other studios, and none of them understood the show. None of them thought it would work. I saw it, being a station guy, as Sally Jesse Raphael flipped, where Sally would do a show, My Daughter Dresses Like a Tramp. We were going to do a show, My Mother Dresses Like a Tramp. We were going to do everything from the perspective of a 20-something. And I thought it was a great idea. So we made a deal. I met Ricki, who I said was huggable. She was 23 or 24 at the time, overweight, but smart and very pleasant personality.
Did you think she'd do really well on television?
I thought she would. I thought teenagers and young people would identify with her because she wasn't beautiful in that sense of the world. She was overweight. She looked like one of them. And at least what I thought them who watched would look like. And then we came up with a plan, I think it was my idea actually, that we should not put the talk show on in the daytime. We were going to sell it to all these independent stations who were usually last. And we wanted to put it on at 5 in the afternoon because I wanted kids who came home from high school and college to watch the show too. And then we also came up with the concept of double playing it. At that point, nobody's talk show was being double played. This goes back to my Miami days, I guess. I'm the double play king. And so what we did with the show is we'd play it at 5 o'clock on one day, and then a week later we'd play it at 10 or 11 in the morning. And it helped start up the sales division, the media sales division for Columbia TriStar. They had this and they had Seinfeld. So instead of farming it out like they used to do to other companies, they started their own company to sell the barter commercials and the shows. So I'm very proud that that helped them. Meanwhile, the show went on the air, and every month for the first year got bigger ratings than the month before. I think it started at a 1.9 rating, and eventually by year 2, it was doing a 5.3, 1/10 of a point behind Oprah, and beating Oprah in demos. That was a phenomenon. That was kind of the most fun year of my life, because every week you walked in and the ratings were higher than the week before, and it passed everybody. There was no other talk show except Oprah that was ahead of it, and we were almost there. And I didn't expect that. I expected success, but I didn't expect that kind of success.
And were you involved in the production aspects of this at all?
Yes. When you are in charge of development, I was also in charge of current, and there was no current except this. So I was in New York a lot for the kickoff. We did 25 practice shows. That took me a little bit of convincing to my boss to spend $1 million on 25 shows that weren't going to air. I said, look, we want to go. This came right back to Antisappointment. It all ties together. I don't want to put on a show and the first day people watch it and don't like it. I said, we have to be ready. She has to know what she's doing. We have to go through how to produce this. And interestingly enough, we didn't have a show that we could air till show number 23. So we did it right. And it worked out.
What were some of the things that happened in show 1 that had to be corrected by the time you got to 23?
First of all, she didn't know what questions to ask because she had never done this before. We had an IFB in her ear. There was a fellow named Stuart Krasnow in the control room giving her questions to ask. There was the exec producer, Gail Steinberg, on the floor with the big boards and writing things. And we really had to help train her to be an interviewer. We also had some strange guests. Part of my job, as simple as this, and people never notice it, we had to reposition the audience. The people who looked like they were too low class or had no teeth or you didn't want to be in the shot, we put them on the sides of the audience. And we put the better-looking people in the middle. So when Ricki would come up and stand in the audience, you'd see better-looking people around her than some of the people that showed up that we didn't want to show. That's producing the audience. You have to do that. And I see sometimes, even today on talk shows, they just have people in the audience wherever they sit. Sometimes that's not good. You'll see old people when you don't want to see them. You got to produce the whole thing. Everything has to be produced. The guests, the pre-interviews, everything else. We even hired someone on Ricki Lake who was a lawyer that was the person who checked out the people. We didn't want to be bamboozled by actors. We wanted real people with real stories. This lawyer would be our fact checker. They checked to see if the story was right. They called neighbors sometimes just to find out. So one thing that we were really thought was important, and this goes back to something I said earlier, honesty. We wanted to get honest people, but these were not the people that you hang out with for the most part. The calculation back then was there are 2 daytime audiences. There's the soccer mom audience, the people who watched Regis, and the people who watched Oprah. That was one type of audience. Then there was the other audience, the people who now watch Jerry and Maury, and they watched Ricki and Jenny Jones. That's the other audience. And I'm not going to say anything pejorative about the other audience, but there's a lot of them out there. And what we were surprised at is all the college kids that watched Ricki Lake, which we didn't expect. We were hoping for, that's why we put it on at 5 o'clock, but we really weren't sure how many we'd get. The 2 audiences who watch daytime, let me put it this way. About a third of America has less than a high school education. About a third of America don't make much money. About a third of America solves its problems by yelling and screaming at each other. Okay. That's like 100 million people. Okay. If 10% of those people are really crazy, that's 10 million people. If 10% of those people want to go on TV, that's 1 million people. It's a lot of people to draw on. For a free trip to New York, nice hotel room. We had to get a hotel that nailed down everything, including the TV sets. Sometimes it was a first trip for anybody to come to New York. But the stories were real, and we had some tough stories. I remember my daughter told me the first show I took her to at Ricki was, I just got out of prison and I want my woman back. But then we did nice shows. I'm in Love with a Food Service Worker was one of my very favorite shows. Very timid people who would go into McDonald's or Burger King because they had a crush on the person behind the cash register. And we brought them out together to meet their crush. And sometimes they'd actually go on a date. And, oh, I like him. I didn't know he liked me, kind of thing. And so they weren't all crazy shows. But I used to describe it when people said, how can you do that? I used to say, well, here's my favorite show. I said, how about a 40-year-old mama's boy who listens to everything mama tells him, who marries an 18-year-old virgin, and after a while, they both cheat on each other. And the guy's sister-in-law is a drug addict. I said, you think it's a good show? And everything, yeah. Well, I just described the royal family of England. Princess Charles die, and they go, oh, yeah. I said, now, the royal family's not going to come on the show. I said, but stories like that exist, and that's why you shouldn't put them down, because it does exist at all strata. It's just that the more educated or the better socioeconomic people won't do the show. But it happens on all areas. And I actually have a distant friend who had an affair with his secretary, and she got pregnant, and one of her 3 kids is his, and yet he's still been married to his wife for years. So, and that happens, and that didn't happen in the I didn't graduate college, I make no money group. So it just shows you that there's a million stories in the naked city. Anyway, Ricki took off. We had a great second year. Just when she hit her peak, she got arrested for demonstrating with PETA, which kind of took a little out of our PR. But the show lasted 11 years and made Columbia hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And that put me on the map in town, too, because all of a sudden I was getting called by all these producers who wanted me to look at their show. My favorite thing at this time was I was 50 years old. And producers would talk to me on the phone and hear my voice and think I'm like a 28-year-old. And when they stumbled through my door, they would do double takes. Are you Alan? And I loved it. They all thought I was this young guy, because who could do a young show but a young guy? Well, maybe I'm young at heart.